Today you're going to hear from Rick Madden and Owen Grieve, mostly Rick, because Rick was a champion in my mind, absolute, genuine, honest, solid, science-based, good man for promoting something that was very controversial, which was don't plough the soil. Learn to do this new way of no-tilling, or direct drilling as it was called more in his day. So he did a lot of work in the 70s and the 80s in Western Australia through to the 90s, and then he retired in the 2000s. But enjoy the genuine man and my friend and mentor in no-tillage agriculture, Rick Madden. Right, well, here we are. Welcome, men. Blast from the past and a great history. Rick Madden, good to have you here. Owen Grieve, ABC journalist for a long time in the rural department. But we'll start off first with you, Rick. Tell us a little bit about your story. Where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up?
How far back do you want to go? Back to day one?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, we'll do that. Bill, I was born in Perth, I think in Victoria Park, lived in South Perth for my schooling and university days. I graduated from UWA in 1970. Well, I didn't graduate in 1970, it was 71, I think, but I finished the coursework in 70. Did a bit of time at UWA as a tutor, and really that was my introduction to learning a bit about direct drilling, because I can recall doing a tutorial with some of the students who were about 12 months younger than me, so it wasn't a big difference in age. And it was based on a paper written by Jeff Pierce, Chemical Ploughing. I think he wrote it in 1969. So that was the start of my interest in replacing cultivation with chemical weed control.
Okay.
But going on from there, I eventually finished up in Darwin as a crops agronomist up in the Northern Territory. I did trial work down at Katherine, Adelaide River, Tipperary Station. Brings back many fond memories, and I'd love to go back there and have a look around again. But we got blown out of Darwin by Cyclone Tracy in 1974, and we went back to Darwin and Katherine for a couple of years, and I eventually finished up joining the Department of Agriculture in Esperance. And again, my interest in direct drilling kicked off again a bit down there, even though there wasn't a lot being done. But I do recall going on to Nan and David Kettle's farm at Condingup, I think it was, and looking at some of his crops. And of course, he was using a Bettinson triple disc drill at that time. Anyway, I had about 12 months in Esperance, then moved up to Katanning, where I happened to meet up with Bruce Boddington, who was up to his eyeballs in spray seed, ICI, and he showed me around quite a bit, what farmers were doing.
Now, Bruce was a farmer or a graduate?
Bruce initially was a Department of Agriculture employee I think he spent time initially in Albany, then he spent a bit of time in Esperance, back to Albany, and then I think he joined ICI in about 1976 and was based in Katanning, and he did work with Ian, I can't think of his name, but a few other ICI personnel, and did some of the early trial work with spray seed.
Okay, now for those that are listening and don't know what direct drilling is, it's obviously seeding straight into the soil, using herbicide to kill some weeds.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was sort of early days of that, so there were a lot of teething problems that were happening. Now, you told me the other day you went and saw your grandfather's farm, though, which is out in the Wheatbelt in Western Australia. Where was that?
Well, I guess agriculture was always in my blood, because you're quite correct. My grandfather was the station master at Southern Cross, and before that, I think at Kew, and he was at Southern Cross in the 1950s. And he also had a small farm out there. I think it was something, probably only 1,000 acres. It wasn't a big farm, but it was out at Gulai, which is about the eastern extremity of farmland in the eastern Wheatbelt. And
So you used to visit him as a child?
As a kid, I can recall going up with my family. I was probably 8 to 12 for the number of years that we actually went up there. And my father used to help out at shearing time. And I had memories of the shearing shed, the wooden building where my grandmother used to cook up at, the shearer's lunch. And I can remember the smell of
Ammonia?
Of cabbage and cauliflower and boiled meat and the blowflies, which were just horrific, waiting to get in the door of the shed. It was quite amazing. But I had vivid memories, and one of the memories was my father pushing sheep down into the plunge dip. It was fenced at the end. It had pens at both ends.
That was arsenic, wasn't it?
And in recollection, I can recall that it was a murky yellow solution in the dip.
Yeah.
And, because of my involvement in agriculture, I obviously learnt later that it was arsenic. And anyway, when I managed to get back to the farm, I've been out prospecting in the goldfields, and we spent a bit of time staying in Southern Cross. So through your various avenues of making contact with people, I spoke to Clint Della Bosca, who told me who owned the land. I looked up the Shire records, found the phone number, rang the landowner and arranged to go out and have a look at the old farm.
Wonderful.
And the only thing that was standing, well, not standing, but underground, probably because no one had wanted to go near an arsenical dip, was that dip, minus the pens on both ends. But it brought back vivid memories, and it was 65 years beforehand that I'd last looked into that dip, and it was still there.
Yeah. I remember as a kid at the farm at Garden River or Jerramungup, you used to have to get a stick and put on the head and their head up.
Push them under.
Make sure they got fully covered.
Well, I can recall this dip was so slippery and so deep that they didn't need pushing down, because I can recall from 66 years ago.
You slipped in the dip, did you?
No, I can recall the sheep disappearing under the liquid, and I thought, how the hell the bugger's going to get out of there? But they eventually climbed out the other side, shaking themselves. And
so when you grew up, you spent time in the rural areas. Where did you? What's your connection first to the bush?
When after matriculation, I couldn't work out what I wanted to do. So after a little while, I went jackarooing down at Linkletter's place down east of Esperance. Now, direct drilling wasn't an issue down there, of course, at that, or even the thought of it wasn't around at that stage, but it didn't really need to, because very lush country with a 28-inch rainfall, dropping off very rapidly, though, to the northern area of Linkletter's place. My first job when I went down there was talking about dipping. Oh, and just as an aside, that dip used to come in Oregon boxes from Berkhamsted in England, where it was packaged up, wrapped in plastic, all sealed in the plastic, and came across to Western Australia.
Wow.
And it had a lovely print on the Berkhamsted factory on the front of the arsenical dip boxes. But anyway, Linkletter's place, and we had cattle, we had sheep, we had a lot of cropping, a lot of Japanese millet sort of crops, fodder crops, sorghum, and of course the rape and the kale and that sort of stuff.
Linseed too.
Linseed as well.
Yeah.
Linseed getting pretty big.
I'm glad I've brought you in there, because I want to go back to the erosion of Esperance, and that was really the motivator for agriculture to change. Now, for those that don't know, Esperance is a very sandy
sandplain
soil.
country.
Yeah, and very, very sandy, like 1% clay.
Yeah. And the rainfall dropped off so quickly
from the coast
going up.
Yeah.
As I said, one part of the property, Linkletter's place, which was 10,000 acres, on the bottom part of Fisheries Road, a 28-inch rainfall, failing away to a 10-inch rainfall up the other end,
80 k's up the road. Yeah.
And just on the dipping, Art Linkletter also had another property called Condingup Pastoral Company. Now, Linkletter's place had 40,000 sheep when I went down, and Conding Pastoral Company had about 30,000. So there were 70,000 sheep, all on Linkletter's Place, that had to be branded and dipped. And guess what my first job ever was? Branding and dipping 70,000 sheep. And it wasn't a plunge dip, but it was a pretty nasty chemical. I've just forgotten the name of the chemical that followed arsenic. Anyway, it was through a shower dip.
Yes,
we had to.
I remember that. That was like a 5-metre diameter.
That's right. Yeah,
and the sprinklers were from underneath and above.
And an old PTO of a Massey Ferguson driving the pump.
Yeah,
and you'd
out
again.
Yeah, it's interesting. These phases come and go, don't they? Yeah. So back to Rick and Esperance. So Esperance was, but you were both there about the same time then, by the sound of it.
76, I was there.
I was 67 to about 69.
Okay. So you saw the same sort of thing. 69 was a terrible year for rainfall.
It was
and
drought, yeah. I lied. 68, I must have been the last year at Esperance because I was in Bunteen in the drought of 69.
Okay, yeah. All right, so
managing a property for a bloke, yeah.
And so, of course, we were doing ploughing. The rain would come, the weeds would come up, and we'd get a plough out, and we'd plough the soil, and then
Garify.
And rip the soil and turn it into powder, and then the big winds would come and would blow it away. So I remember Bob Twigg did a little project at Murdoch University on how this agricultural system that we have imported from Europe is unsustainable, and we've got to change it. We've got to go back and maybe emus and kangaroos and farm them because they're native. But Rick, so tell us. You went the whole journey. You sort of saw that at the beginning, and then your whole career went right through to see some tremendous changes. So that took.
Bill, can I continue about my career?
Yeah.
Well, we got to Katanning,
and
that's when I joined ICI and became part of their direct drilling team at that time. That was in 1978. I actually joined ICI and moved up to Geraldton. As soon as I got up there, they said, no, we need you back in the southern areas because direct drilling is more suited to the sheep cropping scenario. Up in Geraldton, there's fewer sheep and it doesn't fit quite as well, which in hindsight turned out to be, arse about, to put it crudely. I think it was more suited to some of those drier...
more cropping areas that are dry.
More cropping, and it fitted in. And, of course, in the early days, they were more about the food grazing and the benefits of, keeping the sheep off a paddock, getting grazing out it, spraying it and seeding it, and the other paddocks can actually grow away and produce feed. But that was probably not the right way to go about it, initially anyway. But after ICI, I rejoined the Ag Department and spent 10 years in the weeds section. And, of course, in the 80s, when I spent that 10-year period, that was the herbicide era. It was all happening. There was glean, grass selectives, the FOPs and the DIMs and the
atrazine,
sulfonyl ureas and,
It was a great discovery. It was a boom.
It was a boom period. It wasn't only Alan Bond and Laurie Connell and Brian Burt. There was lots going on in agriculture and particularly in agricultural chemicals. So it was a pretty exciting period. From there, I actually went to Murisk and did several years teaching at Murisk, which was pretty exciting, pretty rewarding to see what some of those ratbag students turned out to be and how good they were at what they did and what they're doing now. I was quite excited by that, but it was hard work. When I first went there, they said, you've got a face-to-face 10 hours per week with students. And I said, 10 hours? That's brilliant. That's nothing. But I forgot that 10 hours required 3 hours of preparation for each hour and 3 hours of marking for all the assignments they did. And of course, I was doing trial work and setting up demos for the students and getting them involved in using chemicals and laying out trials and harvesting plots. So it was a lot of hard work and got to me in the end. And I thought, if I'm going to work this hard, I may as well go private and be a private consultant. And that's when it all went downhill. All the farmers became my best mates, and my best mates got all their services at mates' rates. Anyway, it's been a good life in agriculture, and when I think back to how things were in the 70s and how they are now, it's just amazing, to think that back in the 70s, a Massey Ferguson 80 rigid tine combine and a 90 horsepower Chamberlain tractor was the bee's knees, coupled with a 40-foot computer spray or with a 1,000-litre tank, or a well-cut boom produced by Eric Wells at Condinnon with 2,000 litres and a 12-metre boom was top-notch. And you look at what farmers are using now, and it just blows my mind.
6,000 and 8,000 litres, yeah. So, but it's a lot better than my, hey?
There's
10,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my great-grandfather used a horse. He used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, feed the horses, and then go and have breakfast, and then come get them ready to go. And my mum told me these stories, so you were lucky. Times have changed.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously you witnessed the people resisting chemicals, and I did too. I came 15 years after you, or 12 years after, and there was a lot of angst about chemicals. So talk us through that for those that are listening.
Yeah.
Chemicals
just before that, if I could just impart perhaps a little experience of prior to no-till. I went to, in 1970, I went to Marcus Oldham Farm Management College and came back from there, and in 1972, late in 1972, I joined the ABC Rural Department, and in travelling around different rural areas, I was based in Bunbury, and of course that was broadcasting out to Jerramungup and the south coast and the areas out in that fringe area. I remember going out to a neighbour of Bob Twiggs. You mentioned Bob a little earlier, and it had been after a blow. And
Jeff B, perhaps. Jeff certainly was one neighbour.
He was a person I had quite a bit to do with. But anyway, the whole of the understory where you house the sheep before they go up into the shed was right up to the boards was full of sand. So, and the ladder going up into the shed to climb up into just absolutely chock-a-block with sand. And you had to think to yourself, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah,
and of course,
brings back memories, Bill, of going down to Esperance and driving from Noangarup across. Headed down that way, and the build-up of sand across the road, just wind blow and fences covered, back I can recall the vivid white sand up against fences. And
well, I saw it too on the school bus, and the school bus nearly got bogged on the bitumen because the sand was built up so much.
Amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I said the thought jumped into my head in 1972, exactly the same. There's got to be a better way to farm than this. Yeah. and this is the answer, even though it's got chemicals involved. So, Rick, tell us, what's a chemical, and are chemicals bad, or can they be good?
Well, we're living with chemicals every day of our life, Bill. I actually consumed a few chemicals this morning, which I don't like consuming. But
dihydrogen oxide, perhaps?
Look, people are concerned about using chemicals and agricultural chemicals. And can I just go back to what Owen was saying about using dips? During my career, I was a ChemCert trainer for probably about 20 years. And
Chemical certified officer trainer.
Yeah. Well, it was called ChemCert, and they've had a few. It was farm
Yep.
Farm Care initially, then ChemCert, and now it's some other name. But it was involved in teaching farmers about the safe use of agricultural chemicals. And one thing I always said to the farmers, if you're going to poison yourself with a chemical, it's when you're handling the concentrate. And in this day and age, we've got methods of transferring chemicals into the spray vats without actually, having any direct contact with them. But it reminds me of when Owen mentioned about the dip and opening these boxes of arsenical dip, and later sheep showering and backlining sheep. I used to say to the farmers, when you're dealing with herbicides and insecticides and fungicides, you're mixing the concentrate, and if you're using the right gear and putting it into your spray vat correctly, you should have minimal or no exposure if you've got your PPE on. But you guys go out and drench sheep, you backline sheep, you shower sheep. You mentioned 70,000 sheep. Most farmers haven't got that many, but they might be putting 10,000 sheep through or 5,000 sheep. So shearing extends for a week or two, and every day those same farmers are out there backlining sheep, pair of shorts, work boots, t-shirt or singlet, no protection, and they're putting concentrated chemical onto the back of the sheep. A sheep goes down in the race, they pick it up, they get exposed to it. So
we learned a lot about how to better handle this.
Yeah, but the point is, Bill, that farmers didn't see chemicals which were applied to
Sheep
as being toxic or potentially damaging to them, but chemical sprays which they applied to their crops or pastures were,
different.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a bloke applying spray seed from an open tractor at Dandaragan, and his eyes were red, his nose was bleeding as he was applying the spray seed. Spray seed was an incredibly toxic first chemical that had to take a lot. And you mentioned
you drink it and you're dead.
You mentioned BPE. There was none in those days. It was
no preventative.
A handkerchief tied around your mouth and your nose was about all they could come up with.
In fairness, though, Owen, from my early days in ICI, there was heavy emphasis on taking care with spray seed and how it's handled. You had to have your gloves, you had to have your respirator.
But a lot didn't. That was the problem.
And I agree. From the work I did at ChemCert and the contact I had with farmers, there were still numerous farmers who were pretty slap happy about how they handled agricultural chemicals.
The HR wasn't very, very high on the agenda in those days.
Yeah, and you've mentioned spray seed, which we know is a combination of paraquat and diquat, and paraquat's a favourite in some countries of the world to drink to kill yourself, and you only need 3 ml.
And it's
suicide.
Probably the worst way to go ever, because it's not instantaneous. It's lingering.
It takes a while.
And you know you're going to die, but you don't know when.
Yeah, that's very tragic. But
anyway. And of course, things were done to make it unattractive to do that sort of thing. So there was a stench, there were emetics added, and so on and so forth. But if you got that minimal lethal dose, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, but it was. I remember having this sort of torment in my head when I was going to uni in the early 80s, and I was hearing about chemicals, and I was learning about how different chemicals have got different doses, for toxicity. If we drink 6 litres of water now, that's a chemical, that'll kill you. There's a very interesting little story. A girl in the US, she did a school project, and she went around and gave the spiel that said, this molecule will kills more people than any other molecule. It's called dihydrogen oxide, and it if you consume it'll destroy every cell in your body. And she had a whole list of things, and she said, "Would you consider banning this? Could write your name down. Sure enough, she got 4,500 signatures. There's only a few that didn't sign on. And of course, we know dihydrogen oxide is water, and it's true.
Yep.
Water's a chemical and it does kill. So and you don't put water in your petrol car, and you don't put petrol down your throat. So every molecule's, you've got to treat it with respect. So,
Yep.
but this was a dilemma. I know when I first started encouraging, when I had the thought, there's got to be a better way to farm this, and you both were at Esperance when the wind erosion, you saw that with the plough, the soil was just sand and the wind would blow and it would destroy the crop, and the farmers would think, well, we've got no crop, we've done all this hard work. So then you had to toss up, okay, if we're going to use chemicals, we might protect our soil, but will it damage the soil in the long run? So that was a dilemma in people's head. And in my mind, it was, well, if you've lost this much soil over your whole farm, and there's a chemical that we know will break down in a week or two, a month, maybe 3 months. What's the balance there? Which is better? And I think in the end, we've learned that safe use of these chemicals is obviously a better tool, and now agriculture's prospering. But go back to that journey a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. And
well, people were concerned about the health aspects of agricultural chemicals, but they were also concerned about the environmental effect and the residual effect, as you mentioned. And if you look at a product like glyphosate, so what a farmer's applying, a kilo of active constituent per hectare.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a soil, an average agricultural soil, it's got a bulk density of 1.3. So a litre of soil weighs 1.3 kilos, whereas a litre of water weighs 1. So if you look at a depth of over 1 hectare over 1 hectare to a depth of 10 centimetres, you've got 1,340 tonne of soil, or what's that, 1.34 million kilos of soil, to which you're adding 1 kilo. So just assuming it is all contained within the top 10 centimetres, it's less than 1 part per million. It's, not much.
Yeah.
But other things are happening. Firstly, the chemicals being absorbed by plants and broken down by the plant itself. The ultraviolet light, sunlight, is breaking it down, and there's biological activity in the soil, which is breaking the chemical down. And it also, some of it gets bound up tightly on organic matter or clay particles, where it eventually becomes a food source for microbes and bugs in the soil. So, a lot of work's been done with spray seed because they were concerned about it being a potentially residual soil. And there was trial work done at Meckering over a period of about 10 years, I think, where they put hefty doses of paraquat onto the soil and looked at the biological effects over time, and there was none, absolutely none. It might have been there, but it was bound up so tightly that it had no effect on any plants or soil life of any sort whatsoever. Even, when we talk about pesticides, we know that, the organochlorines and that class of chemical, the dieldrins and the DDTs, they can
DDT.
they can hang around a bit for sure.
Yeah. But typically with these molecules, we know from our chemistry knowledge that they've got hexagonal structures in them with double bonds of carbon, which is when you light a match and burn a piece of wood, that your energy that's coming off is breaking those double bonds, yeah?
Talking about that hexagonal diagrams and so on, I can remember Marcus Blacklow, who was a lecturer at UWA, talking to a group of, I think they might have been ex-ICI personnel, or it was some course up at Muresk, and one of the smart ICI personnel, when Marcus put up these hexagonal designs and tried to explain all the chemistry of what was going on and how the carbon and the oxygen and this was all attached to these, the guy said it's the best set of sheepyard designs I've ever seen. And that's what it meant to him. Yeah. But I take your point.
Yeah. So, that energy that's in those double carbon bonds is attractive to bacteria and fungi.
Yep.
And someone finds a way. And in a teaspoon of soil, there's a million 10 million bugs of different types of bacteria and all sorts of things in one little teaspoon of soil.
Yep.
Even our terrible sandy soil that, we have. So
A lot of biology going on there.
yeah, and we probably should add to this, now we've touched on glyphosate as well. That's been very controversial globally. There's been court cases. Kennedy's was involved in California court case, and there was a guy that was a gardener for 2 years and had a backpack on, dripped down his back, and he got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they think that they were linked, and they had a court case, and it went to $270 million. The jury that's all you had to do in California was convince the jurors, and they were convinced that this is what happened. And anyway, subsequently that dropped to about $87 million, and it dropped to about $21 million, and that was in 2017, and the guy's still alive. So, and then they ran the court case similarly last year in Melbourne. There was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. People were putting up their hand and saying glyphosate caused this. But in Australian court, there had to be evidence to prove that was the case. And what was presented on the probably wasn't a problem side was 50,000 farmers in the US, a study of them that had all been spraying glyphosate, mostly Roundup, because they had Roundup ready crops for the last 20 years. Their level of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was exactly the same as the standard community population wasn't involved in agriculture.
Yep.
So the judge just threw it out of court, said, look, there's just not enough evidence. The scientific studies that have been done, which I know I debated the people that did some of those studies actually, on the stage with the Minister for Agriculture 10 years ago. And that the judge just weighed the evidence and said, no, this is we can't see a connection. But doesn't mean that you shouldn't be careful with chemicals, though. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Bill, I'm involved in the community garden down at Preston Beach, and there's a few anti-chemical people in the group down there. But the same people, they smoke, they drink alcohol, they drive cars. They probably take a heap of medications. They use household cleaners, probably with
pretty toxic ones too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, potentially some of them.
Yeah,
and yet they're concerned about safe use of agricultural chemicals.
Yeah. So when we weigh it in the balance, the fors and against, and the big picture story, which is where we're trying to get to, on the balance of the thing, they've been a fantastic tool, and they've really made agriculture viable.
Yep. But, Bill, I've been potentially exposed to chemicals for, 55 years or more. And, when I was in the ag department, I was using chemicals which had no name, just a number. Nothing was known about the toxicity, or not totally known about it. I've been a small farmer. I've been on farms, I've stood on trials when they're doing aerial application of spray seed. I think the Monsanto guy ran for the bush, and I stood my ground and stepped to the side, upwind, of course.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you're filling up your car with petrol, you can get into a place where you smell the petrol,
yeah,
or you can avoid smelling it. And it's a similar sort of thing with this, I think.
Yeah. But, Bill, my health is pretty much excellent. I've got prostate cancer.
Like
and
I
would never blame agricultural chemicals for it. I've never smoked, but I have drunk occasionally, or more than occasionally.
I had one with you.
And I've been exposed to other potential carcinogens. I would never blame agricultural chemicals for any health issues that I've got or I may have in the future.
Yeah.
And what concerns me now is about paraquat and Parkinson's. There seems to be a claim that there's an association between paraquat and Parkinson's.
I haven't read into it, but I have heard it.
Yeah, I've heard of it. And, paraquat was never around until the 1950s. So all the cases of Parkinson's before 1950, what were they caused by,
Yeah, that's right.
It's very tenuous. And as you say, you've got to have solid scientific evidence. And I haven't been into it to the depth that you have with glyphosate, but just from what I'm aware of and what I hear, it's just a bit of nonsense going on.
Yeah.
It's all about grabbing what they can, I think.
Yeah, well, everything should be challenged.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, present your data and may the best, data win,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, so you go on. Your South Coast experience. You worked in the Department of Agriculture. You worked with a chemical company that was selling chemicals. You're trying to encourage farmers to try these chemicals to stop the terrible erosion we were seeing with the soil.
Bill, I was sold on it. Bruce Boddington, my time at Katanning, I was sold on replacing cultivation with chemical weed control. And, I pushed it pretty hard, and there was opposition to it. I've been kicked off more than one farm for when I've tried to talk a farmer into giving it a go. But, I sit back with some satisfaction now to see what has actually happened through the efforts of you and WANTFA and how it's been embraced universally, and particularly in WA and Australia-wide, the adoption of no-till, minimum tillage, direct drilling, whatever you like to call it.
Yeah.
We could argue about definitions if you wanted to, but
nobody would want to go back to where it was, though.
Oh, no, exactly.
After adoption, they
Filling the house
they're all
up,
sold on it.
yeah, filling the house up with dust and bogging the roads down and whatever.
What were the steps, the most important steps that you saw in your no-till sort of development?
Yeah, well, that's a big picture because there's quite a few things that had to come together, and in this probably that'll more be the next discussion. But in this discussion, where the challenges of getting farmers to accept herbicides, to make them work reliably, the way Rick you said before, the problem, one of the problems was you wanted this. You wanted to have your cake and eat it as well. You wanted to let your cropping paddock grow grass so the sheep could then eat it, and then you're growing big roots, of course, and little tops, and then very hard to target those little tops. And so then you've got a problem with killing the weeds because you can't get enough herbicide into those little tops to kill them. And then, of course, you've got big roots, and so when you do a little bit of tillage to try and get your seed in the ground, you've got these roots that are holding on to so much soil, and then the seed placement, this is one of them, seed placement, could be way down here, and that's why halberd wheat was quite prominent, because it had a long coleoptile and it could come up from 6 inches down just about. But that was one of the challenges. And then you had, of course, when you spray these chemicals and they're freshly dying, you've got mushy stuff that's got bacteria and fungi and whatever else.
Bill, can I take you back to 1984? I was in the ag department at that time. You may recall, I think we had a break to the season. Well, I think it was in February, so it was early, but it kept raining. And farmers at Wongan Hills, even back in 84, never seeded until the first week of June. Not like now, if they had rain at the end of April, they'd be seeding. So they all sat back and watched the weeds grow. They didn't have a lot of sheep, and to be honest, there was so much growth, the sheep couldn't keep it under control anyway. So they said, not to worry, we've got this wonderful chemical glyphosate, which had just become commercial in about 81 or 82, something like that. And, of course, they went out and sprayed with glyphosate in mid-June. It was cold, wet and miserable. The weeds didn't die overnight.
Took like 2 weeks, 14 days.
At least.
Yeah.
And it had the outcome you described of large weeds.
Large roots,
cloddy seed beds, rotting organic matter, poor crop emergence, silly seed syndrome, everything. It was a mess.
So the seeds were coming up and going all twisted and left and right.
Yeah.
Silly seedling.
There was a lot of research done on it. I can recall Monsanto, it was Bill Blowers, I think his name was. He put together a paper and summed it up as being organic acids leaching from the dead and dying material that caused the problem. But we had a bit of evidence there was some glyphosate tied up in the plant material itself, which was affecting emerging plants.
Yeah.
And some study I did at Murist with an honours student, we demonstrate that glyphosate under certain circumstances can have soil activity. They're quite unusual, but it can happen at high rates, sandy soils, low binding soils, low phosphate status, so the binding sites aren't occupied.
Yep.
Yeah,
A little bit of residual. I think Tim Reeves showed similar stuff in the 90s. Yeah. Sandy soil, when you spray with glyphosate and then transplant tomato roots into it, you can actually touch the glyphosate. Glyphosate needs moisture, and we've got non-wetting soils here as well, which also would exacerbate it.
Would help.
Yeah. So again, glyphosate does break down into NAD. Anyway, it's phosphorus and nitrogen.
Yep.
So it does end up becoming a nutrient itself. But before it breaks down, of course, it can jump, as you've said, to a small degree. Yeah.
But 1984 was a learning curve. People, farmers, ag department people, consultants, everyone recognised the need. When you get weed emergence, you get onto it, keep it under control. If you haven't got sheep, get out and spray. Keep it there. It's good for disease control, insect control, seedbed preparation, ideal for direct drilling or no-till with knife points.
Yeah.
And what happened was that it made a big shift towards earlier seeding.
Yeah.
Which Jeff Pierce had mentioned way back in 1969, the benefits of early seeding based on ag department trial work in the 30s, 40s and 50s that showed, no matter where you were, that seeding in
April,
May or June, or April, May was much better than seeding in June or July.
Yeah.
Yield,
Yeah.
So
exactly. I mean,
swings and roundabout. We went back in the
40s. I read some of that stuff, particularly on the fertile soil or where they had good nutrition. Sandy soil, where they didn't know about copper, zinc much in the 40s.
Yep.
But once they solved that problem, his data, I read it, and only 8 years ago. You read it 28 years ago. But and you and I went out to dinner with him, or lunch a few times before he passed away when he's mid-80s, which was a delight to spend time with Jeff. But he showed that very clearly, the time of sowing benefit. You plant early, but the insect one was that you just glibbed over that. But that's worth touching on a little bit more. If you get a March rain, the insects have got food and there's green grass and they're living in there. And the population is going up and up and up and up. And then all of a sudden you just cut off the plants, and what are the insects going to eat? Well, they're going to eat the crop that you've just planted. And so that's going to be dynamite.
Well, I can recall, Bill, in my early days with ICI, going and inspecting crops where farmers had sprayed the weeds, direct drilled, and the webworm or cutworm just demolished it.
Or armyworm.
So pest proof, DDT was a standard addition, a litre per hectare of DDT.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, back when we had DDT, there was no bryobium mites, Balorstium mites, there was probably nothing. We probably got them all back then. Once we started using selective insecticides.
That are softer and safer.
We got rid of red mite and cutworm and armyworm, but these other things
Balorstium
came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of them.
Well, agriculture was a virgin state when I was born, pretty much, WA. And so,
some of it probably should be still.
Yeah, probably, but there's certainly an area between Esperance and the lakes that I reckon they could be safe agriculture land if they had the courage to take a little bit more farmland on. But I reckon we'll have lack of food, because of the population, but I've been to Africa for a couple of years, and there's so much land there with so much good soil. There's that argument is.
Well, you even look out at the goldfields, all the non-gold-bearing soil, some of that red dirt out there, it just needs moisture.
Just add water.
Yeah, well, and that's what Ernie Bridge tried to do, didn't he? Get a pipeline down from up north, but water is our problem. We are dry land agriculture, and as you said, 10 inches, just not far north inland is, that's where our rain agriculture finishes.
Bill, can I just go back to the early days of spray seed and direct drilling? And we haven't mentioned the importance of the farmers in getting it going, because, as you know, farmers are innovators. If they see something that works, they grab it and run with it. So it was driven pretty much by farmers.
Yes.
The ag department were a bit backward in coming forward. Jeff Pierce was really the only strong advocate of direct drilling back in those days, and that was the result of a trip to the UK, his own paper on chemical ploughing, which he wrote.
Which was radical.
Yeah.
The words chemical ploughing.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah.
It was prophetic.
Yeah.
And I read something you wrote that was also as powerful as that. You were standing up in Katanning, and I read your paper again 6 years ago and was doing a bit of research on the history of this stuff. And you said you believed that direct drilling would be the greatest revolution agriculture had ever seen since the tractor. Something like that?
Yeah, well, I said in that century or something like that.
No, it's right. It was right.
And I got dragged up in front of Jack Toms and
all the bosses.
Lionel White and all the bosses in the department. And how dare you say that? What do you think about trace elements and crop nutrition? Because they had all been involved in trace elements and thought that was the be-all and end-all of agriculture.
Or wheat breeding, new varieties, what do you think of that? Yeah, but you put the whole package together and you glossed over it again, but it was beautiful the way you did it. You let the green grass go and then you tried to hit it late and then you had all these problems. It was terrible. But now we don't do that, of course. When we get a February, March rain, what do? Yep. We go and kill the weeds with herbicide, leave the residue, the stubble is all still there, it's this tall. No wind can disturb that. We kill all the weeds. The weeds don't then suck nitrogen out of the soil. And they don't suck water out of the soil.
All of those things.
Soil stays, water's in the soil profile. Yep. And then come April, May, we don't need very much rain to get the water to connect to that water there, and away you go. And that's why I've had record crops in the last 5 years. A lot of them been over 20 million tonne.
And it goes back to what I've said, the changes in agriculture from my early days to what I see now. It's just come together beautifully.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's really something to just about bask in. Owen, can you help us bask in this moment?
Well, whenever anybody sort of has said to me, what's been the biggest change that you've seen over your broadcasting career in agriculture? And my answer's always been the change from cultivation to using chemistry.
And what it's done
is
dragged all the machinery into it and all that innovation because people had to spray more, so they needed bigger boom sprays. They had to cover more hectares because they were cropping more.
And are they
bigger
big
tractors,
now?
bigger gear. So it's all just
Worked
dragged
perfectly.
it all in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Timeliness is amazing. As a kid, I used to, on a plough at the farm at Gardner, I used to go round and round and round this, square and ever reducing square.
It's up and down.
Yeah, now it's all GPS and it's all timely and it's all efficient. So,
I was reading the other day, they were advertising something and said accurate to a degree of 2 centimetres on the GPS when they're going backwards and forwards.
They can do better than that now, can't they?
Yeah, probably
2 centimetres.
the more satellites you got, the
when
more
you
you
think
can
of
do it.
a big tractor wheel like that, and the front wheels that steer, you think 2 centimetres is not a lot.
No, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
All right, so that's sort of covered, I think, a fair bit of the issues, but you said also farmers led the charge. Maybe you touch a little bit more on that. You were inspired, obviously, by some farmers that had courage and spine, and they were motivated by different things than what research officers were.
Well, the Department of Agriculture used to have field days then, and you get 150 farmers along, all participating, and all giving their interpretation, 2 bobs worth, and it was good. But somewhere along the line, that sort of failed or stopped.
Yeah,
and I guess that was mainly because of emerging consultants.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was. I think it came about because of succession of agricultural ministers who wanted to downsize the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, well, that too.
Cut resources, cut funding. They were actually pushing commercial enterprises to fill the gap.
To do it, yeah.
Be it
fill the gaps. Yeah.
stock firms, private consultants, consulting firms, they were pushing it.
Private agronomists.
That was my understanding of it.
Yeah, and you look back and I'm not sure, how bad was it? I don't know. Productions continued to go ahead, but farmers still need to be connected to farmers, because they've and they are in their local football communities. They are, but there's less farmers now. I think when you were doing your early days, it was probably 10,000 farmers in WA, and now I think there's about 3,500 broadacre farmers. So,
I can recall a big meeting out at Hyden. It would have been in 78, I think, and Ian Crook Roger's brother, stood up at that meeting. I think there was 300 to 500 farmers. It was a huge meeting. And he said, underneath each of your seats, there's a sticker that says whether you'll be farming here in 20 years or you'll be gone. And all the farmers went, oh, you know, how dare someone say that? Anyway, it's happened, you know.
Yeah.
Half the farmers from Hyden aren't there anymore. They're gone. He was right. You know, that's what's happened.
Economics of scale. Henry Schapper's famous words.
Get big or get out.
Mm,
Yep.
Yep. All right. Well, you've got one more comment there, Rick?
Just about the farmers. A lot of the farmers were into using spray seed or paraquat diquat before the ICI project team got together in 78.
Okay.
And they had a lot of knowledge and information, and those farmers were used as part of the education program for the rest of the farming community. So there was John Laberta at Esperance, there was Pell House at Kojonup, David Anderson at Katanning, Richard Barber at Boyup Brook, Les Colebrook at Brookton, and a couple of guys up.
Roger Cook?
Frank McGill, Roger Cook. He was initially, but they were directorial farmer advisors who were on hand to help farmers
understand.
They were there to answer questions. They got paid, I think, for their time and any fuel money, but they weren't on a salary of any sort. They did it out of their heart to help other farmers, and they enjoyed it, and they were good at it.
And we rode on their shoulders, and we were able to take it further.
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful.
And don't forget the Condinan group.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very adaptive to technology change, and putting out there in front of, I remember going to meetings with 250, 300 farmers up at Condinan or Hyden.
Yep.
And if you wanted to guarantee a big crowd, you got Ralph Burnett along.
Yeah, exactly.
Ralph created a lot of thinking, a real sparky character.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Ralph obviously was around from day one of my involvement.
And Bill Roy as well.
And Bill Roy, who had a big bearing on the success of spray seed and direct drilling. Just from the management talking to ICI UK to get the pricing right so that it could actually work.
Yep.
And they were talking about $1 an acre or something,
Yeah, $2, I think. Yeah. Which is very affordable compared to glyphosate, which was $37 a litre back in the early 80s, which was a lot of money back then. My sister, that was her weekly salary.
Yep.
So for that weekly salary to spray 1 hectare, that's expensive. You're better cheaper with a plough and have the soil blow away, but then you've got no crop. So, yeah.
But going back to Ralph Burnett, he had great ideas. It was low volume spraying because back then, small boom sprays, lack of water, you couldn't afford to go out and put out 100 litres per hectare because you never had the water and you'd never get over the countryside. So he pushed low volume spraying, chemical mixes. He was no friend of the ag department. He was no friend of chemical companies, but
he was a radical.
But he got a lot of farmers thinking, and
he saved them a lot of money too.
Yeah, exactly. But I can recall that Ralph was never strong for or against spray seed and direct drilling. He never really took sides or pushed one aspect.
He said these are options.
Sat on the fence with that.
Okay. Yeah, well, it takes people with courage to to push it forward, and then of course after your the birthing of it, I was fortunate enough to come along just at the right time with all this knowledge that had already been laid down, and then I had the opportunity to work with those farmers again and newer farmers and take it to another level,
with
I guess.
Enthusiasm and character.
And confidence.
And confidence that I never had, and I wish I had a bit more of.
Well, you did get beaten up a fair bit, but we really appreciate, Rick, what you've done. You've been a champion for agriculture in Western Australia. You've laid a fantastic foundation. So on behalf of West Australian Agriculture, I'd like to say thank you very, very much.
Well, I think back what I could have done and should have done and didn't do. And
could have, should
have.
Yep. That's the story of life. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Much appreciate your chat.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for watching this episode, brought to you by 4 Farmers.